Engagement is such an important conversation for a leader of any organization. First 100 days, it's critical because you're establishing yourself and how you look at a team and your positioning within a team. Trust is absolutely a piece of it. You have to develop trust. And I think, though, that there's also a piece about planning. There's also a piece about vision. There's also a piece about what we're going to do together, where the organization's been, where you hope to get together, and how we're going to do that together. I think the trust building is hugely important because that's your opportunity to really not only let them know that you're there to help and to support, but also to garner their input as to where the organization should go. And so when I stepped into different roles, I looked at it pretty methodically. You're going to get everybody's opinion. I think most leaders do that. They'll walk around, they meet people, they hear their opinion. I would take those conversations very deliberately. And what I would look at is I would look at through the lens of three things. One, I would look at personnel, I would look at equipment, and I would look at budget and training. And the whole point was getting their position on where those three things are. What do they need that they don't have? What do they have that they don't need? So maybe there's some reallocation. Understanding this organization from their perspective was really big. But the great thing about it is as you build that trust and as you build your understanding of the organization, you can start to formulate where you want to bring that organization. But it's not just about you, because the one thing I always remember checking into an organization was the only thing that was new in that organization was me, right? So it's about getting the understanding of the organization, getting their perspective, understanding the levels above you in the enterprise and what is needed from your organization, and pulling that together in a way that meets the needs of the enterprise and meets the needs of the people on the team with a logical place to go. And with that comes expectation, right? So not only are you building trust and this is what we're going to do and you're setting expectations for them, but you're bringing them in, which is really their opportunity to set expectations of you.
And I found over the years, Brendan, that people are so surprised when you actually ask for their opinion. You don't necessarily need to use their opinion or their ideas, but the fact that they have a voice and they understand their voice matters in the organization is really paramount. I've also found that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So building that trust, building that confidence, and letting them know that you have their best interest in mind is paramount. I had a boss when I went to be a battalion commander in Hawaii, a boss who sat down with me and said, you need to know a couple things. One, your golf swing is not as good as you think it is. Two, your jokes are not always as funny as you think they are. And your stories are not as interesting as you think they are. And finally, your decisions won't always be right. So he said, how do you increase the ratio of right decisions to wrong decisions? He said, what you do is you create a climate of trust in your organization where people who are close to you have moral courage to come in, close the door, and say, boss, you can do that, but let me tell you the risk and the consequences of the decision you're about to make. And then with that information, you can still continue on that path that you want to, but you have somebody who's a little bit more objective, someone who has loyalty to the organization as well as to you and wants to be honest across the board.
That's a really important point. And what we see in industry is a lot of organizations, they're not able to kind of harness that. There's an interesting model out there, it's called the learning organization, and what it does is it takes organizational anxiety across accountability, and it puts them on an X and Y axis. So you can kind of map where you are, and voicing up is an incredibly important piece. If people can't voice up, then one of the things the military does really well is we assimilate best practices really well. We after action when things went well or when they didn't go well, and we disseminate that really, really far and really broadly and really quickly. And I find organizations are really challenged to do that because oftentimes what we see in organizations is a fear of voicing up. And a lot of that has to do with the culture and the climate inside that organization that's persistent and commensurate with the way the leadership leads. So if you go back to what Tom started with, which was establishing trust, and then you add in that systematic look as to what's the way forward. You bring people within, that naturally lends itself to people being able to voice up. And as long as they understand, if their ideas were put into the system but didn't make it out into the decision and the way forward, as long as you connect with that, with the reason why.
Absolutely.
And usually it's easily explainable, having to do with some sort of risk that could play out as you move forward with your plan. But those are all key tenets to moving forward together. One of the interesting things about all of the things that we're talking about is we're talking about an individual's role in engaging the workforce. But the truth is, much like retention, there are systems for that. It's incredibly important there's symmetry across an organization so that each employee experiences a similar thing. And then the better and more effectively you can do that, the more you can drive the culture and climate of the organization, affecting retention, which is where we started. I think that programs for engagement are really important. I think every organization has them. Some of them, it's a quarterly or annual or whatever your cadence is of management, personnel management, evaluation writing, pieces like that. I think most companies have some sort of a mentorship program. What I think is fascinating about that, though, is though they'll call it a mentorship program, it's kind of one-to-one and without structure oftentimes we see. But I think much like with retention, the more you can look at the workforce that you hope to have and provide some key tenets around those things, and then equip leaders with the tools to affect those. I think connecting all of those things is really important as it applies to engagement and ultimately affecting retention and inclusion.